Yo, 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 what's up, YBOG, your brain on God. What's up? Welcome to episode 7 of Your Brain on God. Mm-hmm. Today, we will be talking about, Daryl, tell them what we're talking about.
Emotional literacy and the importance of language.
I love language. We're going to be talking about how important it is to develop a vocabulary for our emotions because that affects our relationships with people, our relationship with our world, our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with God. And so it's going to be an incredible episode. I hope that you tune in, that you listen to the whole episode through. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Instagram, all of the works. We're still trying to figure out social media, but it's going to be awesome. We love you guys. Enjoy the episode. Yo. Ding, 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 ding. Bow. Yo, what's up? It's your boy Aaron.
And your boy Daryl.
We're both your boys. All right. And don't you forget that, all of our boggies out there. It is Your Brain on God. Episode 7. Episode 7, which is the holiest of numbers. I just want you guys to know that.
Yes.
So this episode has to be good. Otherwise, we probably won't make God proud or...
Yeah. That's what I was thinking about.
This is really good. It's the 7th episode, everybody, and we got some pretty interesting stuff to talk about with you today.
Or does it mean that it's going to be good because it's the 7th?
It's going to be good. It's the 7th episode, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for seeing it in more of a positive way.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I took it as it's the 7th episode, we have to be good. You took it as it's the 7th episode, we're going to be good.
It must be good.
It must be good.
There's no other option.
There's no other option but good.
Wow.
I wonder if that's a psychological thing that can actually help you.
It's going to be
Probably.
good.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, I think so. I think if we assume it's going to be good, we'll be more likely to move in that direction.
Totally.
We kind of, if we think it's going to be bad, we'll be thinking about all the things that can go wrong, and we might end up doing one of those things or saying something weird. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we say things that are weird anyway.
Yeah, we'll say things weird. Totally. No, that's guaranteed.
That's guaranteed.
Take back what I
Weird
said.
things said, guaranteed. Welcome to YBOG, your brain on God. So today, we've got a pretty interesting topic to talk about. We're going to be talking about language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Language. It's something that we use every day.
We speak every day. And
Unless you go on a silent retreat.
Oh my gosh.
I would love to do that. I've never done that.
I wanted to do that with Abby, my girlfriend Abby. Sorry, I'm eating a chocolate Santa in the in the mic. If you hear, I wanted to do that with my girlfriend Abby. Is go to a monastery. Monasteries, I think during COVID right now they don't have them, but monasteries, they have just silent retreats that you can go.
Yeah.
I hope they can't. They probably can hear this on the mic. Me chewing this.
You chewing that? Yes, you're talking.
Yeah, I'm really
probably
close to this. Okay. Yeah, I'm like, okay. Sorry for that sound, everybody. But they have silent retreats that you can go on, and you eat with people. You can hang out with people, but nobody talks.
No talking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think it would be cool. It would be interesting. I wonder how much communication happens there without talking.
Right.
I wonder how much people actually still communicate with each other in subtle ways.
Yeah.
Like little glances at the food, getting your food tray. You kind of like ask them how they're doing. You're just like,
right.
And you're like,
you're all, yeah. And then you just kind of shake your head. It's all nonverbal communication, all nonverbal language. Yeah. Well, they say that body language says more than even regular language sometimes, right?
Yeah, I think it's because our, I think language is used to communicate things, right? It's a tool that we use. We use words as a way of communicating what's inside of us, what we're thinking, thoughts, feelings, etc. And I think language is processed into a certain part of our brain, but then the part of our brain that naturally will show body language is not being filtered in that way.
Whoa.
And so it's more authentic. It's more genuine.
Right.
Reading body language can make more sense of a situation than just listening to the words they're saying.
Right.
And I think that actually people do that, analysts. And when they're trying to understand what someone's saying or if they're being interrogated or
Right. By actually checking the body language.
Yeah, looking at the body language.
Because it's something that just happens naturally. It's auto almost, you know? I don't have to like force myself when I talk to use hand gestures and stuff like that. When I get passionate, my hands get all up in here, you know?
Yeah.
And then you're making different facial expressions and stuff. And a lot of times people are seeing that before it's the reason that you can talk to a dog and you can oh wait, that's more pitch, I guess. And I guess maybe countenance. Do you think dogs recognize your countenance when you like you could say the meanest things to them, but if you say it in a nice way, they'll be like, oh, I love you, you know? Right,
because they don't understand the words you're saying.
Exactly.
But they can feel the vibes.
Exactly. You could be like, you're an idiot. Come to me. And they're like, yeah. I wish people worked like that.
Oh my god.
Yeah, just kidding.
I don't feel like I use my hands a lot when I talk. I do sometimes. But that doesn't mean my body's not communicating something. By the way that I'm sitting or not sitting, or the way that I'm resting. Or
right. I mean, you can be in a conversation and be folding your arms or something like that. And it actually makes people feel like you're not as open when you're communicating. You know, if I have my hands open and I have kind of an open chest or something, too much of that could be like domineering, you know, where I'm talking to somebody and I'm being really way too assertive,
like and you're making yourself bigger.
That can scare people. But like the posture about how you get all of those things communicate things.
Yeah, I was years ago, I was looking into body language when I was studying some like NLP stuff, like coaching techniques.
What's NLP?
Neuro Linguistic Programming.
You were just looking up that for fun?
Yeah, it's just fun.
That's why we love Daryl, everybody, because he was looking up
Neuro-linguistic programming. It's like the language of the brain.
Wow.
Like computer programming, you know, understanding the language that computers speak.
Like binary.
Knowing how to navigate. I don't know. In computer programming, I don't think you really work with... Actually, do you work with binary? I don't know.
I don't know. If you're a computer programmer, please let us know that.
But you work with coding. You learn the coding. You understand... this coding will show up this way. Right. And so neuro-linguistic programming is kind of like that with the brain. It's like understanding the way the brain works in order to understand how that's going to show up in somebody, in the words they use and the way they communicate and their body language, even like eye patterns.
Right.
You can look at someone's eyes and like see different things. And there are just the things that naturally happen within our body because of the way our brain is made up, the way everything's connected.
Right.
That we will naturally do things a certain way. NLP has been used for sure to manipulate and to be used in a harmful way, but it's also been used in a way to help free people from anxiety and free people of addiction, because it's going down to the core of like the programming that's happening in your brain. How do we reprogram that? How can we help you be free? You know, how do we help you get healthier?
Right.
So neuro-linguistic programming, it's really interesting. I didn't do like a whole lot of in-depth studies, but yeah, one of the things I was looking at was body language, and I found a situation where there was this lawyer, and he would tell his clients anytime they were going to be talking to be speaking with their palms up on their lap with their palms up, because when we show our palms, it's a natural openness, and it feels more honest for us and for other people whenever we communicate.
Like if you're explaining something to somebody like
if I'm
this?
explaining something to you, like I would use this gesture when I'm trying to say something that I want you to believe.
But open palms is honest. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe not like
what
this,
am I doing?
But down here.
Okay.
Like in a posture of like, I'm letting it go. But even though no one else is going to see their palms, because their palms are going to be on their lap under the table, he would tell them to communicate that way, so that way it calms down their nerves. They don't feel like they need to try to say something, but they'll speak more naturally,
right?
Which will make them come across more authentic. And so it was used to help people, even if they didn't want to come across as like stressed out or nervous or something, because that might be seen weird. Right. But if they just relaxed and had their palms up, it was a lot easier for them to communicate authentically.
Yeah.
And so open palms is a sign of openness and honesty. Generally, when people are talking, that's often what the situation is.
Yeah.
Or a way that we communicate it.
It's crazy that our body language, it can communicate something to our own body as well as to people outside too.
Yeah.
So you actually changing your actual body posture can send signals to your mind to actually change how you feel about something.
Yep.
It's like doing my roommate used to do, what was it called? Like almost like superheroes. So he would go in the mirror in the morning, and then he would like puff out his chest.
Like victory stance.
Yeah, victory stances, and he would put his hands on his hips like he was standing like Superman, and he would just look at himself, and it was power poses.
Power poses. Yep.
And by changing his actual body language, or I guess that wouldn't be body language, just
that's body language.
It is body, yeah, okay. By changing his posture, it would actually like send like, hey, I can do this, rather than to be slumped over, to be sad, cross arms, protective, and all of that stuff is super connected from I'm just thinking in totality of where language comes from, or where even beliefs come. You have beliefs that send signals down into your actual, you speak out of what's inside of you, but then your body's connected to that, and what you do conveys what you mean, but also can change how you speak. It's like crazy how everything is connected. I know I didn't say that very well. All of that, but it's stuff
connected, and it also affects one another. Like our body language affects how we feel, and how we feel affects our body language.
Right.
There's been studies on this, and there was a TED Talk on it actually a while, I don't know how many years ago. It was really cool, like how language affects your body, or can your body change your brain? That was that kind of a thing. Can your body language change your brain? And they did this study with a bunch of people where they had people go into interviews, and they had to they took one group of people that did power poses before the interview,
right?
Another group of people that did the opposite, so very sad, slumped kind of positions that you might take if you're scared or intimidated or nervous or insecure, or and the way that they performed in the interview reflected that.
Right.
So all of the people who were the board of interviewers all approved of the people, or they were more likely, I don't know if all of them did, but they were more likely to approve and accept the people who did the power stances before they went into the interview.
Wow.
Because they presented themselves more confidently, they weren't as closed off, they were more energetic and engaged.
The interviewers didn't know which people were which, right?
The interviewers didn't know who was who, or who did what.
Yeah.
And they looked at studies of people doing the same thing, what's happening inside your body with the chemicals that are being released. And whenever you take a closed off, downward kind of sunken posture, your body releases more cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Wow.
Which makes you just feel more stressed and depressed and heavy and sad.
Right.
When we take power poses, it releases more testosterone,
right,
which is the opposite. It makes us
right,
feel like we can do things, we're confident, ready to go.
Right.
They did the same thing actually on Brain Games, that show, where they had they took two people. One person did power poses, another person did sad poses. And they were like having them take pictures in these different stances. So they had them do all these different like sad poses or all these different power poses.
Right.
So the person that was doing the power poses was more likely to take a risk of gambling. So right after they did this photo shoot, they're like, okay, now last thing, do you guys want to test your luck to see if you can win this, da-da-da? And most of the people who did the power poses says, yeah, let's do it. And the people who weren't doing those poses were like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter if it was a guy or a girl. It was like whoever did the poses, the power poses, were more likely to say, yeah, let's take this risk. Let's try this.
That's so crazy that you could actually change. Yeah, you could actually change your mind by just your stance, your posture.
Yeah, our body language can actually change our brain.
Sometimes I think it's just so silly though that I don't do it myself.
You're like,
yeah, you just feel so.
It's like, okay,
you feel so silly, or it just seems like it does seem like a game almost. Like it's, I don't know. That's just my own personal experience. Like my counselor said this that every single morning, like how he starts his morning, he goes in the mirror and he just smiles at himself, which I think is awesome. And some of those, I guess that's my own heart. That's just like, oh man, that's silly, or I don't really want to do that sometimes.
It feels goofy.
It feels goofy, but I think even some of those goofy things like smiling at yourself in the mirror, or putting your hands on your hips, and I think this is it creates that more open stance. I think that's why you might be able to take more of a risk, is because this posture where you have your chest out and it
feel
says
more confident.
It says I'm already protected. You know what I mean? Like I got this covered. You know what I mean? Like we're gonna be all right. This is like I need protection. You know, and so that's like a fearful mindset of like trying to protect yourself. But even when you put yourself into that, it's like no, like I'm open to whatever comes. And that can totally change your brain chemistry. I know my roommate Rob. Yeah, he was doing that every single morning, and he said it helped a lot. It changed the way that he went through his day. I had a friend Reese. He would when he was like going in for a big test or whatever, he would put on a suit.
Nice.
Yeah, or like when he had like a big interview or whatever, even if the interview was just like the next day or something, he would put on a suit because it was like it made him feel confident, it made him feel and it would totally it was like he was communicating to himself that he was, that he was powerful, that he was strong,
powerful, that I'm valuable, that
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy. And there's so many things that we can do that communicate to ourselves that we might not even know about it. Like we are convincing ourselves of something,
right?
Whether or not we're thinking about it.
Whether or not we're thinking about it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. So, I mean, that ties into language a bit, talking to yourself and where kind of that.
Yeah, the language that we use. Totally. Yeah. I think in a general sense, we have a language that we use that we picked up when we were babies, right? When we're babies, nobody knows how to speak anything, but you teach a baby how to speak by speaking to the baby.
I came out speaking fluent Latin.
Dang. Yeah. You still got that? Or is that
No. I just, there's no one to speak it with. English. So it's like, it's really hard to.
Yeah. And that brings me to the other thing.
Yeah.
But we just learn how to communicate with people by making sounds,
Right.
It's like we have these different sounds and we figure that they mean this thing. And so we start using those sounds.
Right.
And we learn how to communicate to people through that way. And we were just reading earlier about the twins, 2 twins who don't have a lot of interaction with their parents often create their own language.
Yeah.
Where they can communicate with each other that has nothing to do necessarily with the language of their parents. But they start attributing the same meaning to the same sounds, and they've created their own language that they understand. And when we use language, that's what we're doing. We're trying to understand each other, right? And I think that the words that we use to ourselves even affects the way that we understand ourselves. The words that we are saying to ourselves, our own self-talk. We convince ourselves of things. We attribute meaning to certain things. Right. And with speaking with other people, the meaning that they attribute to words might not be the same thing that we attribute.
Right.
And so I think part of the key of communication, one of the keys of communication is understanding what the other person means rather than assuming they mean the same thing that I mean when I say that word.
Right. Yeah. Because we're all speaking out of our own culture, our own background, our own environment. So growing up, I mean, things just meant certain words could mean something differently to me than they mean to somebody else. Yeah. And so when I speak those things to somebody else, they might be having the same, they might be hearing what I'm saying, but not actually hearing what I'm saying, not actually hearing what I'm trying to communicate in that, because our language, we just grew up with different language, Yeah. And so that's really important, obviously, for relationships and building relationships, is knowing how to express language to each other, how to communicate to each other. And I mean, they say that in relationships, like communication is the number one thing that you need to have.
Communication is key.
Yeah, communication is key. It's the number one thing that you have to have in any relationship is communication. And the reason that we have so many arguments and so many problems, so many quarrels with other people is because we could either be saying, we talked about this before we started recording, but that we could either be saying the same thing but be meaning totally opposite things. We're using the same language, or we could be using different language,
but meaning the same thing.
But meaning exactly the same thing. This just happened to me. I was at a coffee shop and I was talking to this person about Jesus, and she was she was in a church. She just went to a different church, and she was communicating to me, and it was like she was using just language that wasn't a part of maybe our church culture, and so I was trying to understand her, but the way that she was communicating things made me kind of think that she was saying something else, and so we kind of got into, not, I guess you would say like not an argument, but like, I guess a heated, debate
discussion.
Heated discussion about some things. I was like, I don't really understand this, or I don't really, but at the end of the day, we finally realized like, oh, we're saying pretty much the same thing, just the way that you're saying it, or, was really confusing to me. And that shows how important it is, how you actually communicate something and where we come from, those backgrounds about how we actually use language. I mean, to quote the Bible, the power of life and death is in the tongue,
those who love it will eat its fruit.
Right. And so it's important how we communicate to each other.
Yeah, I think that the key, I think something important about communication is not just trying to hear the words that the person is saying, but trying to understand the person, right? Like not overemphasizing the words that you said this, or you're saying this, but actually trying to understand the person who's communicating, not the way that they have communicated it.
Right.
Because I think there's times when we have words that I might say something because it's the best thing that I know, the best words I know to use.
Right.
But maybe it's not what's true to what's inside of me. I just don't know how to say it. I think that we can have grace for people to try to see past that, or to ask questions to see deeper into it, what is actually being communicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of arguments happen, like what you were just describing, where people will be arguing about the same thing, but they don't know it. Uh-huh. Or they're arguing about two different topics and they don't know that.
Right, yeah.
They're like saying they believe this about this thing, and they're like, no, I believe this about this. But they're really talking about two different things.
Right.
And there's been situations where I'm like, I think you guys are talking about different things. So when you say this, what do you mean?
Right.
You know, and they're like, well, I mean, da 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 da. And the other person's like, oh, I thought you meant and so. You know, it's like this, when we lack clarity in, there's a gap in the way that we understand each other, we can't communicate. It's like we're speaking the same language, but we're not speaking the same language.
Exactly.
Because we're attributing different meaning to what's going on. Mm-hmm. So looking past the actual words and trying to understand the person, even though obviously the words are the way that we try to understand the person. Right. That's the purpose of language. Right. Is we're trying to communicate something with our words. Right. But I think sometimes we can look beyond the words to try to understand the person. You know, what is actually being said. And something that my sister said, I don't know if I've said this before, but she said, I don't argue to be right, I argue to understand. So whenever somebody says something, she disagrees, she will push back. Right. Because she doesn't know if they mean what she thinks they mean. Right. So pushing back to trying to gain clarity. You just said this. I think this about this thing. What are you saying? Right. You know, and trying to gain clarity by having those conversations and engaging in those conversations through language to get clarity on what do you actually mean when you say that? Right.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to know a person rather than just like listen to little sound bites. I was having a conversation last night, and it was like we take sound bites from people, and then we create entire identities about those people, or what they believe, you know, what they stand for, and who they are, based off of sound bites of words that people say, when they could be communicating. The context of those words is very important. Where they were saying that, why they were saying those things, what the purpose of the entire speech. That's why, you know, the climate right now is like taking very specific things that people say in the political sphere and then totally blowing up to, I can't believe they said this, or can you hear this? This person stands for this. And it's like, well, those are just sound bite, right? And so you're not really in the room with that person. You don't really know the person. You're not really seeing past or trying to understand. You're just taking the language that they're using, applying your own view, which is even worse, applying your own view of what those words mean even to that person, right? And what they're communicating through those words, and then creating entire situations that might not even be a reality based off of the language that they're using.
Yeah, I think that's such a danger that happens when we assume that our way of speaking is the only way of speaking, or our way of understanding is the only way of understanding, thinking that this person who's saying this thing means what I mean when I say that. Right. Therefore, they said this and they are this. Right? They are this way, or they think this way, or these things are important to them, but maybe they mean something else. Maybe another perspective exists. Right. You know, maybe they have another view, and that's where they're speaking from. But if we don't give ourselves the chance to not be the only existing perspective. Right. You know, when we think we are the only existing perspective and anybody who's different is wrong. Right. Then we miss out on what's actually being communicated. You know, we just point out the things that offend our perspective and our way of using the words.
Yeah. Which is, it's really rough.
I think it could be crazy. I think there are beautiful things about that, about the multiple perspectives. I think that learning other languages, whenever we learn other languages, we have to learn to think in other ways, because the way thinking happens in another language is different to how it is in our own.
Language it comes from culture. Yeah. You know? Right. So specific cultures have their languages. Language affects the way that you see things. Right. So the way that you communicate about something, or the way that you describe something, or even just even the origins of languages, that how the words were even developed, right? That all affects language, and then that language affects how you communicate those things, or what you actually mean at those things, depending on your culture. Something that was really cool when I was in Africa is I learned the language Zulu.
You learned the language Zulu?
Well, not. I'm fluent in the language Zulu, actually. No, I only learned a little bit, and I think I can only remember the phrase "Ingia Kulumo isiZulu kanqaneje," which means I know a little bit of Zulu. Yeah. And Sambonani.
Oh my gosh.
Which means hello, but it's a fun way to say hello. You can say Sambona, I think. Sabona or Sambonani. I always say that one. But the way that they develop cultures, a lot of their language is built on onomatopoeias, which is like bang, blop, bop, bam,
pow,
pow. Yeah,
boom.
Exactly. So their word for knock, it's a click language, but their word for knock, the verb to knock, is ngongoza.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
Exactly. But, so that language was created based off of the experience of the world that they had. Yeah. So in the same way, when you meet somebody else, that's not just in different cultures nationally or internationally, right? But in different household cultures.
Yeah, the language that they use.
The language that they use communicates their experience of life.
Yeah.
Right? So when you say something, you're coming from a completely different culture, and then you could say the same word, but that meant something different in their culture, in their household, in their environment, right? So you're speaking the same words, but you're on completely different frequencies, right?
Yeah, and that can be a frustrating thing. Yeah. But it can also be a beautiful thing. It's like when you first said that, I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like all these, we all come from somewhere different, where the language that we use and the language that we have is unique to our life experience. Right. And so when we speak with other people, there's an opportunity for our life experiences to exchange something, right? Where we can learn from each other, where we can expand our way of seeing the world through conversation, because our language is reflective of our life experience.
Right.
And what a missed opportunity whenever we assume that someone else's life experience is the same as ours. So we don't try to understand the world from another perspective, or what they are communicating when they say certain things.
Right.
There's so much out there. And that's true with every household, it's different.
Yeah.
Totally. It's different with every household. And there's, we were looking up some languages that are whistle languages.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. And I don't remember, there's the one in Turkey. There's a village in Turkey that still uses the whistle language, and one off the coast of Spain that uses the whistle language.
Silbono, I think, or something like that.
Silba or something.
Silba. Yeah.
And it makes sense that they used whistling for so long because of where they lived, because they lived in these mountainous regions, and the sound traveled for 7 kilometers or something. It said that they can communicate with each other 7 kilometers away just by whistling.
Right.
And it wasn't like whistling to communicate general concepts. It was like they're like, we can say anything we would say in Spanish,
Right.
And they would just whistle a bunch, and for us it sounded like gibberish, like they were just whistling, It's like because we have not attributed any meaning to those things.
Right.
But that experience of living in those regions allowed them to develop this way of communicating that aided their life. Right. And I think that we use language that fits our life experience, right? We use the language that we are required to in order to survive and communicate in our life. Throughout our life experiences. Yeah. And
that's interesting.
I just thought about that right now as I was thinking about it, but I thought about that as I was thinking about it. And our life experience requires of us sometimes to use certain language. And I think that we can look at somebody else speaking another language or using the same language like English, but using it in a different way and think that their way is wrong. But their way works for surviving in their environment or for the world. The slang that's used, there's always new slang coming out nowadays, but that's something that's used in the context of the lived experience. And that is how you communicate in that environment. And I know that we wanted to talk about emotions as well, and the ability to identify emotions and put language to emotions. And I think that makes a lot of sense that sometimes we're in environments where it's not required of us to be able to identify our emotions specifically.
Right.
In that we just broadly use terms to describe things,
right.
or a lot of like our parents' generation or their parents' generation
right.
is stereotypical for guys not to do. You just don't do emotions.
Right.
It's like men don't feel emotions. And
right.
I was in a psychology class, and I remember having that exact exchange with somebody, an older gentleman in the class, who
right.
the teacher said something about emotions and our ability to have emotions, and he said guys don't have emotions. He's like, men don't have emotions,
or men don't cry, right?
Men don't cry. That's what he was saying. Men don't cry. Yeah, I told you. And it was so interesting to me to hear him say that, because I didn't grow up with that narrative. Right. I grew up knowing that was kind of a thing, a stereotype, that like, oh, crying's not really a thing guys should do.
Right.
But it wasn't like men don't cry.
Right.
Like if you're a man, then you don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't something I grew up with.
Right.
But in the environment that he grew up with, that was the language that was given to him.
Right.
So he never learned to articulate certain emotions.
Yeah.
That he would be experiencing. Right. And I think with those stereotypes where men don't feel emotions, or men don't feel anger. That was like the acceptable,
right.
Like the acceptable emotion was anger.
Yeah.
And if you're going to feel something, you're going to be angry.
You're either feeling nothing or you're feeling angry.
And, obviously it's not that closed off, but
yeah,
I think that says something about the environment that we grew up in, that,
right.
and whether or not they actually aid us in identifying the emotions that we experience. Right. I think that we can create environments that help people do that, or encourage environments that discourage people doing that.
Right.
Then there's not opportunity, or there's not help provided, or language even given
right.
to what that means. So am I angry, or am I frustrated, or am I disappointed?
Right.
Or am I hurt?
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes I just use that word. No, I'm angry.
Yeah.
And when we have language to identify those feelings, we can deal with them and process them, I think, more appropriately.
Right. Yeah. Why would he develop language if the belief he was given up, or language to express himself, if the belief that he had growing up was men don't express themselves that way, or
right.
like to communicate, I guess maybe hard emotions that he was experiencing. If he was told as a kid, hey, men don't cry, suck it up, or whatever, why would he even, go, to a class or something like that would help him articulate those emotions that he thinks that's just not even a thing for guys anyway, you know? But it's crazy how your environment, your beliefs growing up can affect that language, and then it can cut short your ability to actually express what's actually going on inside of you. Just a quick thing. I remember Kendrick Lamar is a rapper, and he's a really a very poetic rapper. I think he's totally. he's not a clean rapper or a Christian rapper, but he's got some pretty deep things to say. I remember listening to his one of his first albums. It was called like To Pimp a Butterfly, and I remember listening to it, and it was just a lot really dirty for me, so I just stopped listening to it, and I was like, I don't get why he just has to communicate like this, and someone kind of opened my eyes, because they said like, well, this is how you communicate where you grew up, like this is the way that he speaks, and this is the way that he expresses what he's feeling about the culture, the environment that he grew up in, his struggles that he's going through. He uses cuss words, because that's the environment that he grew up in. There's nothing, so just a further saying about how you can't kind of judge somebody by their language. By their language or what they're saying, because it's like it comes from that culture that you grew up in, and then he's expressing his emotions, what you're talking about. He's expressing it through a language that he knows, or that came to him, or that he was taught, growing up, which is like, good on him for at least expressing it. But it is, we do miss out, I'm just trying to touch on a little bit of the points that you were saying, but we do miss out on being able to actually express what's going on inside of us if we don't have language to express what's going on inside of us, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the problem lies. It's like, well, I'm just so angry, like what you were saying. I'm just so angry, but it's like, are you actually angry, or are you anxious, or are you feeling afraid? Are you feeling like you don't have control? Or are you feeling threatened? Are you feeling insecure? Those types of things. All of those things can lead to expressions of anger. Right. But if you don't actually have language, I guess it would be emotional literacy, right? The ability to convey through language what you're feeling on the inside. You won't actually convey that. And I do think that is a different thing that we have in this generation versus in generations past. The ability to communicate, or even that being a thing for guys, to communicate what's going on inside them and having the language to articulate that.
Yeah, and I think it's different for different cultures. Obviously, not every culture is going to be the same, and different cultures who speak different languages would have different experiences with this. But I think with our generation, there is more of a freedom to express, and there's actually more of an encouragement to express and to identify what we're actually feeling. There's more of a focus and emphasis on self-awareness than I think there might have been decades ago. Yeah, totally. And we have the luxury of growing up at a time where it's encouraged to do some self-exploration and learn how to communicate what we're feeling and what we're experiencing, and identifying those things so that we can better relate with other people. We can better communicate to somebody else how we're feeling in that. And I think it's beneficial in our relationships with each other when we can have those conversations, and we can be more open and not just trying to guess and struggling and frustrated in our attempt to express how we feel. I think that the more that we grow in being able to identify those things and communicate them, the more we are understood, by others, the more we can be understood by others, and the more that we can understand others as well. Because if I can identify it in me and you identify it in you, then when you tell me you're feeling a certain way, it'll be easier for me to understand how you're feeling. Totally. But if I don't have those words, I don't know what it means to feel ashamed. I don't know what it means to feel disappointed, or whatever. If I don't understand that, because I haven't identified that in myself, it's going to be harder for me to understand you. And vice versa. If I try to use words to express how I'm feeling, but you don't know what that means, it's going to be hard for you to understand me. And so our ability to use language to identify our emotional experiences, I think, is huge for our relationships. And then growing in our relationships and closeness and vulnerability and and just increasing the value of communicating. I read in Brene Brown, she's a psychologist, or she's a sociologist, that a lot of the times when people feel really tired, and you hear this all the time, it's like, how are you? I'm tired. But she was writing that a lot of the times when people are feeling tired, studies have shown that they're not actually feeling tired, they're feeling lonely. And that's the actual experience that they're feeling, but they're communicating it by saying that they're tired, because it's easier to say to somebody that I'm tired than to say to somebody, I've been feeling lonely. Wow. That's a lot more vulnerable. So if you say, Aaron, how are you doing today? Oh, just tired, that's a lot easier. And it's like, oh yeah, me too. But if you ask me and I say, I'm really lonely, it's like, ooh, bye, Aaron. I don't know if I'm ready to get into this right now.
Yeah, exactly. I just asked you how you're doing. I just was looking for a good, but our ability to actually, and that does come from self-awareness, right? You need to be self-aware to be able to communicate and articulate what you're feeling.
Yeah, because what if I am feeling lonely, but I'm not aware of that.
Exactly.
Until somebody else, I think something like what you just said, if I would ask you that and you said lonely, if I've never experienced that, that might actually relate with me. I might be like, oh, I think I know what that feels like. But maybe I never used that language before.
Yeah. And so it totally opens you up to be able to articulate yourself in a different way, to be self-aware when somebody calls out something like that. And it's like, oh, am I actually tired, or am I actually angry right now? Or am I anxious? Am I afraid? Am I lonely? Am I, am I feeling insecure? Am I feeling lost? Am I feeling stuck? Am I, all of those different things and then to be able to communicate those things. I mean, it's crucial, absolutely crucial for relationships in life to be able to communicate what you actually feel about something without, for somebody else to be able to understand, because and to give the grace for other people as well to be able to communicate or even learn, and have the grace for them to learn how to articulate themselves if maybe they didn't grow up in an environment where emotional literacy, right, or the articulation of emotions was a thing, the language of emotions was a thing, So to have that in relationship, to be able to connect with people, that's huge, because we just get the wrong ideas all the time about what people are actually saying, and we're not actually seeing their hearts. And then we soundbite, we take people's identities, and we, like we talked about earlier, we soundbite their identities, and then we get a very limited scope of what they're actually saying, of who they actually are. And it totally breaks apart relationships. It breaks apart marriages, for sure. It breaks apart kids and parents, and it just breaks apart relationships in general. It's really dangerous to not be able to express that, or to not allow other people to express that and learn emotional literacy and be able to use language to communicate what's going on inside.
I whenever Brittany, last year Brittany said this to me, but oftentimes she would ask me how I am. She's like, "Hey baby, how are you doing?"
Right.
And I knew that she was asking like, "Hey, how are you?" And I would say like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm just tired." And that was often. So many times I said, "I'm good. Tired."
Right.
And she was like, so often you say good, tired. She's like, but she said like, I want to know more about what that means.
Right.
What else are you feeling? Why are you feeling tired? And so now when she asks me that question, I take more time to actually think, okay, I feel tired. Why do I feel? Oh, it's because I feel heavy from this thing that happened, or I feel stressed, or I'm, a little anxious about this thing, or, it's like, or I'm just exhausted, whatever it is. Maybe I'm just tired because I didn't sleep enough, but putting more words to what I'm feeling and answering her question, because she doesn't want me just to give 2 words when she asks how I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. I want to have a relationship with you, Daryl. Can you?
Exactly.
Can you say a couple more words than good, tired?
Yeah. So now when she asked me, I'm more intentional to put more language to what I'm feeling, and to how I'm experiencing life, and because through that we connect. Right. She has an opportunity to understand me more when I use my language to communicate what I'm feeling and how I'm doing, rather than just keeping it very basic or general. And I wasn't trying to shut her out or anything. It's just that's what came to me naturally. I didn't grow up often thinking about my emotional experiences. I wasn't trying to articulate how my emotions were, and I wasn't giving all these language tools to identify things. And those are things I've had to learn since being an adult, and trying to do some more searching on my own, and figuring out, okay, what is it when I'm feeling like this? But she would ask me that question, and I would have to intentionally use more words to communicate in order to open up, in order to build more of a connection, in order to relate with her more, so she can understand me and see into me, and so we can have a closer relationship. And it takes intentionality sometimes.
Instead of being a teenage boy.
Totally. I was being a teenage boy for far too long.
Right. Where they come home from school and you're like, how was school? Good. Yeah. Are you doing all right? Fine. And that's really, that's not because they, I don't want to speak for all, of the people in that spot. It's oftentimes because, okay, Aaron, calm down. Okay. It's often not because people don't want to express what's going on, It's often because they don't have the language to be able to express what's going on, or the self-awareness to have the language to know what was going on. Looking back, I was thinking about this this week. Looking back on me in high school, I was anxious. I just didn't know what was going on. Right. So now it's like, I can think to myself, man, I can get a lot more anxious than I was maybe in high school. And then I actually thought about it. I was like, that is not true at all. I'm way more peaceful. I was really anxious, but I just didn't know how to express it. Right.
Yeah.
And I just used escape to cover it up. Right. Escape into any manner of drugs or people or events or whatever. Right. But I just didn't have the language to be able to communicate what was going on inside me. So I'd wake up and I'd be heavy and I'd have anxiety inside my heart, and I would take a shower and then be like, I don't know what's going on. I wouldn't even think about being aware of what was going on inside of me, let alone having the language to articulate what was going on, and I do think that's like a good thing for parents, like as a youth pastor, if I can, speak that in, your kid is it's not that they don't want to talk to you. They probably just don't have the language to express what's actually going on inside them. And they're not probably just saying good, fine. But it also is exhausting to actually use language to express what you're saying, or what you're feeling sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to just be like, good, I'm too tired to even say what's going on inside of me to you right now. But like you said with Brittany, it builds relationship.
Yeah.
When you're able to use that language to connect with somebody, right? And then when somebody knows you, they can hear what you're saying and actually connect it to, oh, that's Daryl, that's what he's feeling right now. And because you're able to articulate yourself, relationships build, and you can connect with her. Deeper intimacy is made, and then you guys are stronger as a married couple.
Yeah, totally.
All because of the ability to use language to describe something that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
Oh, the idea of not calling something good or bad, but but using language to describe something. So Daryl and I, we both work at the same church, and we just kind of were learning about this last week about the use of language to judge something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. About to call it good or bad rather than actually describing something in our lives.
Yeah. So instead of saying that this is a good way of behaving, saying that this way of behaving is uplifting. Using these kinds of words are encouraging. They are life-giving. Yeah. This thing is life-giving, or this thing is damaging. This thing brings pain, rather than saying this is bad. Right. Because when we make a judgment on something, we are less likely to give ourselves the freedom to explore what's really going on. If this is bad, then I'm just going to push it away. Or if this is good, then I just need to keep doing it. Right. Whenever we suspend judgment, we can kind of describe what's actually going on and have a better understanding of it, and then choose whether or not we want to do it. Right. If we say it's a good thing, even though maybe it's having a bad experience, it's good to be really tight on my money because I don't, it's helping me stay afloat. I could, I'm not worried about going, running out of money. I can pay for everything. But maybe it's creating some kind of stinginess, or like a greed, or a worry that I'm not going to have enough, a scarcity mindset. Mm-hmm. But if we just say it's a good thing to save money, it might be missing those other things that it's creating. Right. So what is actually happening? Am I being greedy? Am I being stingy? Am I being scarce? Am I being generous? And whenever we are able to describe those, we can choose if we want to keep doing that. But if we just say it's good to act this way, then we're probably going to keep doing it. Right. If we think it's bad to do this thing, we're probably not going to do it. Right. But if we can describe what's actually going on, right, we give ourselves more of the freedom to choose whether or not to do it anymore. Right.
It's like using language to judge something versus using language to describe it. Which comes back even into the relationship thing as well, right? Yeah. Hearing somebody's thoughts about something and then immediately judging, or that's a bad thought, that's a good thought, and immediately making moral judgments about that thing rather than actually describing, or allowing them to describe what they're saying to you, right? Yeah. Or allowing yourself the ability to describe what you're feeling or what's going on. And we do, I do that to myself all the time. That's why it was so freeing this week when you said that, is that I'll have a thought and be like, that's a bad thought, right, instead of being like, let me actually describe what's actually going on inside of me. So that in describing it, what happens is I end up getting language to be able to communicate that to somebody. So that way, when I'm being vulnerable with somebody and saying what I'm going through, I'm not just saying I'm having all these bad thoughts, right?
Right. I have these thoughts that are discouraging, that are causing insecurity or anxiety.
Yeah. That are life suckers.
They're life suckers. Yeah. Uh-huh. My sister, when she would ask she'd be like, how are you? And if you said good, she would ask, what's good? Right. I mean, like, what's good? What's good that's happening in your life, Right. Or how's your day going? Oh, it's good. What's good? And then because she wants to know, okay, well, now describe to me what you mean when you say it's good.
Right.
Yeah. But I think, sorry, it just came to my mind, but I think I think that practice can actually help people who maybe aren't naturally just going to describe everything. Just asking, okay, well, what does it mean that it is good? Right. What is good? Right. Can help. Like if you have teenagers or people who you communicate with, where you would like to know a bit more about what's going on inside of them, right? And it might not be natural to them to just start talking about it. That question can open it up. more, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was talking to my sister, if I ever said good, I was never surprised if she asked, what's good?
Right.
Then I would go on and tell her, today I went for a walk. That was really refreshing. And then, I went and spent some time just being in nature. And then I went and hung out with a friend, and I got to describe and use my words, my language to connect, to create a form of connection and a way of her understanding more of what's going on inside of me.
Yeah. Using questions to build relationship, I've realized is like, it's the greatest way to actually know somebody is to have questions for them that are deeper than just like the how are yous, and then and then to do what your sister did. Well, what's good, or what's actually going on, or why do you think that's good? And then it's like it actually causes them to think differently, and to ask more specific questions. And again, that's probably a whole different podcast for building relationships or something like that, but to ask specific questions that allows a person to use their language and learn how to articulate, I don't know, I didn't even think about why I was good, or I didn't even think about why it was a bad day. I guess it was just, I don't know, that was a quick response, and let me actually think about it. You're giving a person the opportunity to actually describe to you and to build. I think that even builds emotional literacy when you offer somebody the chance to be able to speak into why they're feeling a certain way.
Yes, totally. I think that I was just thinking about that before you were saying it as well, is that it actually encourages a different kind of communication and a different kind of culture. Yeah. Because our language defines our culture. The way the words that we use, the way we talk, how we talk, it defines the environment that we're in, and it defines our experiences of life. The Romans conquered, and Alexander the Great conquered so much, but it wasn't just about conquering the land. He also conquered the culture through language. Yeah. Everywhere that they conquered had to learn how to speak Greek. Right. And that's how they dominated and kept control of so much, because everybody started speaking Greek and started thinking Greek. Right. They started thinking in the other language. Right. When I was trying to learn how to speak French, never I did it for a few months. Bonjour. But I was listening to these tracks on the CD, and the teacher, his method was to teach you to think in French so that you can speak in French. So, because if you can think in French, you would start speaking in French more easily, more naturally. But you had to learn how to think in French first. Wow. And so that was his method. It was about changing the way we think, because that is going to help us speak a certain way. Right. But the same way, our language, the way that we speak, affects the way we think. Right. So I think asking people those questions encourages an environment where that happens more naturally. Right. And where it's a more practiced skill to articulate. Yeah. And people just love when you actually want to get to know them. It feels good. Yeah. When you actually ask them questions about their life, and then they get a chance to actually describe what's going on. That's awesome. One last thing that I do want to talk about too is learning how to describe your emotions, learning how to, the emotional literacy part. And then, but not just in relationship to people, but in relationship to just your experience of life. My girlfriend, Abby, she said this thing that would really impacted the way that I thought about something, but she was talking to us, and we were all sitting on the roof, eating pizza on the roof, on our roof in the condos. And we were sitting up there, and she started talking about the way that we use language really affects our both our ability to describe what we're feeling and somebody else's ability to know us. And so she said, like, the use of slang sometimes it diminishes our ability to actually express how we feel about something, and the ability for somebody else to feel that same way or to connect with us in a deeper way. So the idea is, she said, we could all look at the same sunset and we could say, that sunset looks sick. And all of us have a different view of what sick means, Right. There's the literal version of sick, and then sick is like, oh, that's really cool, or sick is that's really pretty, or sick is that's really peaceful, or that's really calm, or whatever. We could all be having different views of what sick is. So when you look at a sunset and you say, that's sick, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We don't want to make those moral judgments, but we are in some way, we're diminishing our ability to actually express how we feel about the sunset. That's a beautiful sunset. It actually touches something. It causes a peace to come
to come over when I look at that sunset. It kind of clears out my mind when I'm able to look at that sunset. The colors are so magnificent. It's like the sunset is painted, and even when you start saying stuff like that just made me happy just saying that right now. I'm like, wow, sunsets are awesome.
I was like, whoa, this is beautiful.
Exactly. And I'm painting an entire picture for you because of language, actually using that to describe something, right? And then on the same token, if I just say that sunset's sick, Daryl, if I just said that, you could just be like, yeah, that sunset is sick. But if I actually said that's beautiful, that's incredible, now you're getting to know me and how I feel about the sunset. That builds the connection here and our ability to convey how we actually feel about things, all through the use of language, which is so cool.
And if I wasn't thinking that it was beautiful before, I might be now.
Right.
If I was looking at it and you started describing it and I wasn't paying attention to those things, I would start paying attention to those things more. Like, wow, that is beautiful. Whoa, it does look like a painting. That's so cool. That's so sick.
Right. Yeah.
But if you just said, oh, that sunset's sick, I'm like, yeah, that's sick.
Right.
But I might be missing the details that you are seeing in the sunset.
Right.
And when you articulate the details, it gives me the opportunity to see the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to appreciate what I see.
Yeah.
And I think that's just really cool that God gave us that gift of language to be able to describe things. And that's like something even I guess a vocabulary, having a vocabulary about how to actually describe how you see things. It affects everything. We were eating this chocolate Santa before we started the podcast, and then we're like, this chocolate Santa is so good, and then we're like, what do we mean by good? And then we started describing, oh, it's creamy, and it's it's delicious, and it just it brings this warm, calm sense. And I started to enjoy this chocolate Santa more than I probably should. I was like, man, I love this chocolate Santa. It was so it created a whole different experience of life for me. It's something so simple as eating a chocolate Santa.
When we were thinking about it and then saying specifically what we were experiencing.
Now I want some of this chocolate Santa. Yeah,
it was like it enhanced the experience just by articulating what we were experiencing.
Right.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's really cool.
Sick.
That's so sick. But yeah, I think that language is so important for being able to describe the things both internal and external for the sake of relationship with yourself, with others, and with God. So if I can describe what's going on in me and I can articulate that as well as what I experience in my life, life is going to be a whole lot more clear for me because it won't be this ambiguous, hey, I feel angry or I feel sad. It's going to be a lot deeper. I'm going to know myself more. It's going to give you the opportunity to know me more and for me to be vulnerable with you. You're gonna understand what I'm describing. And then there's a vulnerability when you actually have a relationship with God, to not just say, I don't know, get rid of my anger, God, but to actually have the emotional vocabulary or the experience of life to actually describe to God, hey, this is what I feel about this, Lord. I need you to take these specific things and help me deal with this. And I know that this comes from my culture, this comes from my environment, this comes from my background, and I need you to reshape this so I can live from your perspective about those things, all of that stuff. So that can all be affected through the ability or I guess the willingness to step into having a deeper emotional vocabulary, a deeper knowledge of language in your own life. And it helps you when you do that for yourself, you end up doing that for other people as well. Asking them the questions about how they actually feel, for them to describe it to you, giving them the space to develop their own emotional literacy.
Yeah.
All of those things. It's just super helpful.
And I think that helps. The more that we can do that, the healthier we can be in our emotional awareness and our emotional intelligence and just our way of processing and handling our own emotions.
Right.
When we can have those conversations and encourage those conversations, we can help ourselves and each other experience more freedom when it comes to that, and more of an ability to be healthy in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that a telling sign of what we believe and what we think and what we feel is just the language that we use as well. So I think that it's when we start listening to the language that we use, intentionally hearing ourselves, that can help us identify where we are at.
Right.
If I just say,
out of the abundance of the heart,
out of the abundance of the
mouth
heart,
speaks.
The mouth speaks. Yeah. And if I am saying certain things often, I might want to stop and think, what do I mean when I'm saying that? Or do I really feel that way? Do I really think that thing?
Right.
Is this true to who I am, or am I just using this language because that's what I've always done, or because I've heard other people say that, or maybe that's no longer what I'm feeling or thinking, but I keep convincing myself of it because I keep saying it.
Right.
And I think that we can convince ourselves of other things, through that process of how can I say that differently?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Language reveals what's actually going on inside of you. And so that also comes back to self-awareness, having awareness of, man, I just said that. Do I actually feel that way about that person? Or am I actually feeling that about this situation? Like that totally just came out. I mean, and then there's the whole, I want to say the dark side of language, which is like passive aggressiveness and sarcasm.
This is a whole nother topic.
Yeah, it's a whole nother topic that we can talk about later. But just to touch on it real quick is you can use passive aggressiveness. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Passive aggression.
Passive aggression.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
something like that. Or sarcasm to communicate things that you don't even know that you're feeling. Right. And now you're using language that you're saying one thing, but it means the opposite. And you can either know that or not know that. And that gets into a really dangerous place because there's some relationships that are just straight up built on passive aggressiveness and sarcasm.
I think that comes from the inability to, or the not knowing how to articulate it.
Right.
And so we know that I can articulate my anger or my disappointment with you by being sarcastic or being passive aggressive.
Right.
And so I do it that way because that's the way I know how to communicate it.
Right.
And I haven't learned a way to communicate another way. But
or the silent treatment.
Treatment.
There's nothing. I hate the silent treatment, dude.
What has the silent treatment ever cured?
It hasn't cured anything, dude. Stop doing it, people. Okay? Just please. In relationships, it's like, I'm just not going to talk to you. It's like, oh my God.
Doesn't fix anything.
How about grow up? I'm sorry for calling it out, man. It just shows that you're not willing to sit with your emotions. And even if you say this, hey, I think I need time to step aside to not talk, that's at least to communicate that's totally fine. But don't just sit in silence and not say anything and then allow somebody else to try and figure out what you're saying when you're not saying anything, or to know what you're feeling without saying anything. Hey, that's another podcast.
That
so you know what I'm saying?
Because we use language as the way that we understand each other.
Right.
And by doing the silent treatment, you're cutting off a key ingredient in trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, well, you don't understand me, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah. Next week, passive aggressiveness and sarcasm, the cure to it, okay, is getting over yourself. And we'll talk about that next week. I'm totally messing. Well, you guys are awesome. Thanks for listening in to this week's episode of Your Brain on God. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, on iTunes, on YouTube. Your Brain on God. All of our videos are up there. Yep. We're super excited to keep this going, to have you guys listening. If you have any questions, want to tune in, message us on any of those things, iTunes, or you can't do it on iTunes, but on Instagram, Your Brain on God, or
Yeah, we have an Instagram as well. We're figuring out how to use.
We don't know how to use any of this stuff. We don't really do social media and get videos out. This is the first time we do it. So thanks for your grace. But also, that's it. That's actually it. That's it.
And that's the end.
You guys are awesome. Thanks for joining in on this week's episode of Your Brain on God. Peace out.
Love you.